Good morning, as folks know. Good afternoon, as folks are joining here for the 9:30 call conversation about the 9:30 call case study from crisis to enduring community and action. We are so excited to have folks here today. We are recording this, and we have a multitude of perspectives and experiences that we're going to highlight here on the call. And we want to get started right away. So I'm Amy O'Leary. I'm the Executive Director at Strategies for Children. This is a meeting webinar, a meeting, so not a webinar. So everyone will appear kind of on screen at the same time. And we hope that folks can join us, on camera. We understand that people might be off camera. But as folks are coming on, we'll just introduce the sections of conversations we're going to have. And here's a little bit of the agenda. We're going to have our quick welcome. The team from Strategies will do a bit about the history and the evolution of the 9:30 call. We're going to highlight the takeaways from the case study, and then have a series of conversations and reflections and closing thoughts. And so the other piece we want you to think about are some key questions as we are all gathered here today. And we'll put these in the chat. So to share a memory, moment, word, feeling that comes to mind when you think about the 9:30 call. If you want to mention a favorite guest that we've had, one thing that you've learned on the 9:30 call, one person you connected with or met on the 9:30 call. We also know that people got jobs through the 9:30 call. So if you wanted to share that. And then if a group wanted to create a community like the 9:30 call, what advice would you give? And then finally, why do you keep coming to the 9:30 call? And so these are meant to just be conversation starters, have you kind of get grounded in this moment to think about these things. You don't have to answer all the questions. We will save the chat, and we look forward to kind of collecting this feedback. So first we want to start with some gratitude. And we want to have gratitude for the love, the vulnerability, the can-do problem-solving innovation, the kindness, the compassionate spirit that has become the hallmark of the 9:30 call. We want to thank every single 9:30 caller, from first-time callers to long-time listeners, every guest who joined us and often fit 1 hour of content into 27 minutes, every elected and appointed official who always said yes. We have to thank Zoom. We'll tell some stories about how we all learned about Zoom. And then we want to thank, we can go to the next one, our funders. We are an independent nonprofit advocacy organization. We don't accept state or federal funding to do our work, and we're founded by philanthropic foundations, grants, and donors. And special thanks and appreciation to the W. Clement and Jessie V. Stone Foundation, especially to Sarah Slaughter and Brian Dixon, who are here with us today, for supporting Strategies for Children in our work in general, and then for the case study. To Minna Jung for your incredible, thoughtful, beautiful way of capturing 4 years of the 9:30 call in writing. And to Tanya Lazar for your expertise and collaborative spirit designing the case study and everything else for SFC. Anyone who has ever taken a Word document into a designed piece knows kind of what goes into that. And we just also wanted to set the context. Marissa found this slide to remember where we were 4 years ago when we thought about COVID, the global pandemic, and kind of the inspiration for the call. So you can see this timeline, starting in March 10th, that there was a state of an emergency declared in 2020. And then remembering that state of emergency lasted till June 15th, 2021. We saw a lot of things happen over this time. The creation of the emergency programs, everybody had to close, people began to reopen, all of the policies that got developed and through that time. We just wanted to remember that. And if we go to the next slide, you can see this was an early description of how we described the call. It was a daily advocacy call for our community. It started with about 30 stakeholders, and now the invite list at this time was 500. Now we know we have almost 1,750 people on the invite list that are getting emails every week. We invite guest speakers to share information in Massachusetts in early ed, but other sectors. And now we've gone national. We used to send out a follow-up email with daily summaries, contact information, slides, and additional resources. We have since created an infrastructure where we have a 930 call website. And this call provides a space for increased collaboration, partnership, and advocacy opportunities. And so now as we think about the key takeaways for the success of the 930 call, I'm going to call on my team SFC partners in this work, Titus, Mary, Marissa, and Marge. And we just want to highlight, because the case study was kind of the story of the 930 call, but also some key takeaways. So Marissa, I think you're going to start first with the consistency.
Yeah, I can kick it off. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I'm Marissa Fair. I'm the Director of Policy at Strategies for Children. And that the timeline slide Amy just shared really took me back because I joined Strategies for Children as an employee like 3 days after childcare shut down in Massachusetts around March 26th. So being able to see the evolution of the 930 call over the past 4 years has been such an incredible experience. And I think I've learned so much and happy to share sort of this first takeaway with you all. So the first thing we wanted to bring up was we heard a lot from those who were interviewed for the case study and just in our reflections as staff around consistency. And I think that really shows up in 2 different ways. So consistency and sort of the impact that that has on us as staff and our capacity and what we're able to do. As Amy mentioned, we had to sort of phase out some of the things that we were doing in the beginning part of the 930 call when we were in this sort of crisis situation and there was constant policy development, ever-changing landscape. Something like a daily email was essential, and it was jam-packed with resources and connections and content. And 2 years later, that wasn't as essential, and we were hearing a little bit more of a need for establishing a more permanent structure where we could save slides and save the chats and have it be accessible and easy for everyone to access. So what's really been interesting for us is how much that has ebbed and flowed over the past few years, and that the beauty of the 930 call is that it can change with the situation and it can adapt and we can be responsive to the needs of the community given any period of time. The other thing that's really stood out to us is just the everyday nature and how that plays into consistency. So in the beginning, the first 2 years, again, the 930 call was actually Monday through Friday, and we eventually took off Friday. That has become our sort of special non-930 call workday. But having something that is every day for half an hour, it's the same time every morning, 9:30, has been a place where folks know that if they have a question, if they're interested in a topic, if something does come up, they know that they can come to this space and that we'll be discussing it. So having that sort of consistent nature through the 930 call has helped to, I think, increase our connection and advocacy efforts within the early education and care community. I think that's all I'm going to add to that piece, and I'll turn it over to the rest of our staff to share the rest of the takeaways.
Thanks, Marissa. Who's up for number 2?
I am.
This is Neri Garcia, our Director of Communications, and
I'm multitasking. I'm trying to record and do this at the same time, and I'm trying to get the speaker. I can't see myself, but maybe that's a good thing. All right. So
that's very nice of all of you, Neri, right now, working on technology.
My piece is inclusivity. Inclusivity and a lack of hierarchy should be foundational principles for creating and maintaining the community. So I joined Strategies for Children 2 years ago this month, and I started right when we were first talking about the early childhood agenda. So 2 years into the 930 call, I was able to see this really great community that was coming together. But we were asking ourselves, like, who was missing, right? Who was missing from the table? Who is not able to call in at 9:30 in the morning every day, Monday to Thursday? And so in the spirit of inclusivity and of equity and of engaging the folks that are closest to the work, we have 2 spinoffs of the 930 call. The 930 call at night in English, which is hosted on the second Thursday of every month. And we have the 930 call at night in Spanish, which is hosted on the 3rd Wednesday of every month. The at night in English, we've been running for about 6-8 months now. or so. And now it's becoming a thing. The last call, we had 75 primarily family childcare providers call in and talk about C3 grants. It's more of a open forum where people can come in and share their frustrations, ask their questions, and be, most vulnerable at that time. So, and we are then able to be responsive to those questions and to those anxieties. The 9:30 call at night in Spanish is only in Spanish. It's funny because someone emailed us asking if they could call in, and we were like, sure, but they didn't speak Spanish. And so it was like reversed, right? Like we're getting Spanish speakers wanting to participate and aren't able to, or don't feel as comfortable because of the language barrier. And so we felt it was important to incorporate language in this community as well. And we have the help of Harold and Paula, two of our advocacy network folks, co-hosting, which gives us even more authenticity because they themselves are childcare providers. So that is all I'm gonna say. But
Thanks, Mary.
I feel like part of the evolution of the call is sharing the mic, sharing this platform to existing partners, but then also, making new friends.
Thanks, Mary. And we'll hear more from Paula and Harold later in the conversation. What about number 3?
I'll go
Titus?
next, Amy.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. This is Titus Dasromedius from Strategies for Children. And I've had the honor of being a guest host for a few 9:30 calls over the year. So you may remember me or recognize me from the 9:30 call. But yeah, on page 6 of the case study, I was lucky to get a quote in that says, "We are historically a neutral organization. We're known as a neutral convener. We don't run programs and we don't receive any state funding. So it made sense during a time when it was necessary for everyone to understand what was happening with the coronavirus and when childcare providers could reopen, that we would take this on." And honestly, it was the least that Strategies for Children could do at a time of such crisis, especially when educators were in the classroom offering essential emergency childcare for essential workers. So I remember that time very vividly, and we are proud as Strategies for Children to be able to continue to play this role as convener in our state, in Massachusetts, and provide that open platform for folks from all different vantage points from the field, different roles to come together and connect. And we've tried to keep this authentic as well. Friendly, welcoming, relaxed, conversational. That's kind of our organizational culture, and we are proud that the 9:30 call has that same vibe for both guests and attendees, and I'm just happy to be a part of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Titus. And Ron Dorsey said to me once, I think one of Titus's early guest hosting was to remember that that's how Jay Leno got his job, guest hosting for Johnny Carson, which is a Generation X reference. So if you don't know who those people are, I can provide some context. We did ask about what generation people were in the 9:30 call in the beginning. It was always interesting to see the spread. So Marge and I are going to talk a little bit about the community, and so the 4th takeaway is creating a community like the 9:30 call requires explicit intention in creating and maintaining norms and ongoing attention. And so I think when we were working with Minna and kind of doing the early interviews, the question came up like, well, did you set ground rules for the 9:30 call? And the answer was no, we didn't. I think part of it was when we created it, we were an emergency. And I think people were feeling vulnerable. A lot of us shared, I often cried on the 9:30 call. We laughed, but I think this self regulation of the 9:30 callers and kind of what it was about has been incredible to think back. When you go to any coalition meeting, usually the first thing you do is establish ground rules and norms. And it was, maybe it was the time, maybe it was the spirit of what was happening on that call, but to see how it has evolved organically, and to Neri's point, who's missing, what else do we need to do? We are a lean team of 5 full-time staff. So what does that look like? Who's taking on what parts? It really has become an organizational priority. It has changed the way that we think about community and our work. And so Marge, you and Mary joined kind of around the same time. You joined us first, kind of 2 years in. What were your observations as you came into this community?
Well, I remember like 2 years ago, I went to my first 9:30 call and I thought, wow, I can't believe there's 50 people on this Zoom call. How did they know about this? How did this come about? And I was just fascinated that there was so much information within like 30 minutes. And then I said, I can't wait till tomorrow. What's tomorrow? What's happening the next day? Who's coming on? And I think it's such a so valuable resource for so many different organizations and so many different people to just come together. But yet the bottom line is they all have the same goal. It's really in the best interest of children and families. I don't think that this is a very common type of thing that's evolved. And I think it's just a wonderful way for people to really collaborate and connect. And I see this growing and growing as time goes by. And it's because really of everybody that's even on this call right now. I think things evolve and change and just keep on growing. And I only think that this sector is going to grow stronger because of it. And that's sort of, I guess, my take. I think we're on such a momentum at this point, and I think really that the 9:30 call has helped to keep that momentum going. And
Thanks, Marge. And
I'm
Marge,
excited about
also
it.
we talked about like all you've learned, like you came in with a set of
Yes.
knowledge, but just all that you've learned, getting to know the key players. We've heard that's
Yep.
been another takeaway. People have said it's their first entree into this work. And for those of you who don't know, Marge is often my behind the scenes co-host, letting people in from the weight room. So it really is a full SFC team spirit. So let's move on to our first conversation. And so we're gonna take the slides down. So Leea, Donna, Bino, Lucas, and Aditi. So let's take the slides down. Welcome. And as you are talking, just do your quick intro of, your role. But Bino, I want to start with you. When you think about your journey from program director to then working at Neighborhood Villages to then becoming the testing maven of Massachusetts, right? Every 9:30 call, people were tuning in to see what is Bino going to tell us today about COVID. So can you talk a little bit about that experience and kind of how you connected the infrastructure that Neighborhood Villages was setting up kind of in this emergency response to the people that needed the information?
Yeah, and I still joke sometimes that I was called the testing lady of Massachusetts because I'm an early educator. I never liked science in school, and somehow that became the thing that everyone needed to know at the time. And I think the 9:30 call was a big sort of pushing point for that. And as I mentioned in the chat, the Voices of the Field are really, really powerful call. It's always one of my favorites. And we would hear a lot from providers and educators that teachers would be out for 7 days, 10 days, not because they had COVID, but because they didn't have access to tests. And that there was a lot of fear in being able to be proactive with COVID and not reactive. And so really setting up that testing infrastructure for early educators that were in classrooms that were open was really important. And so as we began to do that, the 9:30 call became a really amazing opportunity and place to share those updates. And now as we've sort of evolved, past COVID and past testing, I often run into people in person who will say, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you. I know you from the 9:30 call." And so it's sort of how we've all connected and stayed in touch, I think, out of the Zoom world and in person. And I have to say, for me personally, I transitioned from director to Neighborhood Villages in 2020. I've presented a bunch of times on the 9:30 call, and it's really sort of built that confidence, I think, for me as a leader and being able to share with fellow colleagues like this. And I always encourage anybody to present on the 9:30 call. It's such a welcoming and kind place where you're really given the confidence to do that with this group.
Thanks so much, Bino. And I know we've thanked you before, but for all the work that you did, the experts that you brought to the 9:30 call, right? As you were figuring out not just the logistics, but the science between testing, how you partnered with the state, like really stepped in and provided this critical service. We were talking about visuals for the 9:30 call case study, and that one visual of who got vaccine access when. We were saying how that became central to our conversations, and where were early educators who were opening their doors, not knowing how the virus was spread. Which brings us to Donna Denette. So Donna Denette, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to the 9:30 call, and how you prioritize joining every day? If you tune in, usually Donna is there on camera, even though she might be running around in her office.
Yeah, I'm pretty religious about attending it, and I miss you on Fridays. I have an alarm on my phone that goes off at 9:20, wherever I am, and it's built into the schedule. We actually, in our staff schedule, it says the call on my line during that half an hour, so people know only to interrupt me, or they'll peek around the corner and say, "Are you live?" To know whether they can interrupt me or not. It's been very emotional thinking about how to talk about the past 4 years. Then I thought, like, that's kind of my hallmark, right? Other than Amy, I think I'm probably the other most emotional one on the call. And it was, so I didn't know about the call in the beginning, and I was really trying to reach people who would help make a difference in what was happening on the ground. And so I was writing to the governor and trying to collect signatures and trying to coordinate people in Western Massachusetts, hence hashtag 413 is one of the things I'm known for. And I was feeling like just frantic on how to move us forward, keep everybody safe, and figure out, we would often say on the call that we were building the plane while we were flying it. And, and I was a pilot. So it was really important to get as much information as I could as early as possible. Dr. Shu was a game changer. The testing was really huge. I also felt like the notification to providers was always that Friday afternoon, and it was supposed to be in place on Monday morning, and that was a big stressor for everybody. And we were seeing in our programs that there were certain pieces of the regulations that were in place that weren't making sense based on the science and what we were having to do and the impact it was having on our educators. One of them was that we knew that it was airborne as early as July, and we were still making everybody wash at everything every day. And we were burning out our educators on something that we didn't need to do. So I was putting that into the chat pretty much on a daily basis, and finally really felt like people were listening. So for me, somebody said earlier it was a lifeline, and that was what I wrote as well. Like, it was an absolute lifeline for me. And I felt like I had to balance being professional with really letting important people know how bad it was. And so I chose to just be vulnerable and let you all know how bad it was.
Well, we appreciate that. And we that's why we didn't record it in the early days, because we wanted people to know that what they said at 9:30 in the morning in panic state was not going to be kind of held against or reported back to the state. I think that was really important of a norm. And, now we definitely record more, and that kind of emergency is gone. But as you know, Donna, Donna and I got to meet each other in person, which was incredible. And I think also, Donna, I learned from you is that you can build meaningful relationships through Zoom, when you think about what was able to happen. So I'm sure you'll have more to say as we continue on, but thank you for that. And Leea Cooley has a very similar story about how she heard about the 9:30 call. And then now Leea has been part of our Strategies for Children Advocacy Network. So Leea, as a family childcare provider who did open up for emergency childcare, you want to tell us a little bit about your experience? Oh, I saw Leea. There she is. Oh, you're on mute, Leea.
There, in the beginning, there were no guidelines. There were, if you felt like you were flying by the seat of your pants. And once the 9:30 call was established, now we have guidelines. Now we have PPE. We have meetings to help us through those guidelines. that for me, absolutely, without a doubt, was my lifeline. Without it, I don't know if I would have made it through safely or sanely. I
Right.
just, you know, it actually was a calming point for me each day to know that, okay, I can go on here and gather my information. I can hear what other providers are going through and have a takeaway from that and work collaboratively to try to make it better, because we needed to be here for our first responders, and they were taking care of our families or our communities. And I truly felt the need to do something. I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. So my talent of childcare was what I could give back to my community. But it was scary. Absolutely was scary.
And Leea, I think you also became such a representative of kind of, you know, of sharing this information with other providers and then thinking about where you could fit. You are working full time, you are part of our advocacy network, you are now a lived experience leader in our early childhood agenda. So just watching your incredible trajectory and giving you this platform has been so exciting to watch for you. And just so happy that you found the 930 call and that it provided support.
I'm very proud and very excited to be part of it and continue being part of it. I've been able to meet Titus and Jay Lease, and that was an awesome high point for my vacation time last year. And I want to stay connected, and I want to spread the word that you guys are there to help us find better ways to collaborate and make our jobs more fulfilling.
Excellent. Lucas, speaking of making jobs so fulfilling, Lucas, you know, at Acre Family Childcare was one of our early callers. So Lucas, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, somehow I was part of the initial invite list for the 930 call, and I felt like Charlie Bucket having found his golden ticket. And looking at the rest of the call, I understood why everybody else was there. And I think I sometimes was a little clueless how I got in the room. I was used to family childcare systems not being at the table. I was used to Lowell not being at the table. And the big thing I remember is always being welcome and regularly being asked to share updates and concerns. I remember on an early call when someone shared that there was a touch up my appearance option on Zoom. And I remember the collective heartbreak that we all felt when every single person excitedly checked their setting and realized it was already on. I remember when Senator Warren was on the call, which was perhaps the first 930 call at night. And this was a huge deal. People brought their kids to the call to listen. And I think that this was the very first time I ever heard someone putting out the message to say, the goal is not to get back to normal. The goal is not to get back to how things were before COVID, and that we need to recognize that we didn't have a functioning system before. We've always made things work, but that doesn't mean that they worked well. And that this was the time to imagine what this system could be. There were many days, especially at the beginning, where optimism was very, very hard to be found.
Yeah.
And this call always provided a welcoming community and some level of hope. And I'm always thankful for that.
Thank you, Lucas. You almost made me cry, Lucas, because I think like that feeling of like, I don't usually see myself at sitting at tables. And people were very suspicious in the beginning, like, no, everyone can't go. No, I have to be in some list. And part of it was just mechanics. We had an Excel spreadsheet list to get the information out. And remember, we changed the Zoom link every week because we were worried about Zoom bombers. So it could have felt exclusive because we were trying to figure out technology. We have since have our 930 call landing page where we have the calendar. You can go back and look at the calendar that's from 2020 on, all of our follow-up materials, which has become an incredible archive of information. And so now as we kind of close out this section, Aditi, I may cry now.
You and I both, Amy.
The support that you provided us as a community in the middle of a global pandemic, and now that you have transitions with Christy to coming on monthly to kind of give us a day to just think about things that maybe we don't get a chance to think about. Tell us a little bit about you and kind of your role in this community and your role in the larger community as well.
Oh, Amy and Donna, I'm with you. I think we have to have more spaces where we can lead into feelings and not feel like we're not professional about it. So I just want to name that it's, I am having a lot of feelings, and just hearing the collective, you know, the Sankofa bird comes to mind. We have to look back to look forward. And I just so appreciate even the pause at this moment for us to collectively look back at what it felt like literally felt like in chaos for all of us. I think for me, I was equally, I'm also a parent of a young child. And so like living it personally and professionally, to be a part of this work in holding how we are as professionals, as we are trying to navigate with staff, with babies and families, when there's completely no sense of consistency, both with COVID and also such horrific acts of racial injustice, right, at the same time. And I remember sitting with my colleague at the state, and we worked, because our kids were home, we worked at 11:30 at night. Christy was a part of it. And we created social stories to say, how could we be of support to understand? And it was listening to all of you to say, like, how do we support our youngest when grownups were having a hard time wearing masks, that our youngest are being superheroes? And how do we support educators in like the idea of the feelings behind, not just for our youngest, but for each of us? And I'm just so grateful that, you know, our experiences are not siloed, like education is not separate from mental health. And I think this call and this community really has centered that we all hold all parts of ourselves to show up as full human beings. And I think that part of having consistency with my dear colleague Christy to be here and really pause. I mean, it's this part of, you know, we're so go, 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 because that's the work. And in order to go, 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 we have to slow down. I mean, I keep telling, I have it right here, like, pay attention to how grind culture is showing up for you, Aditi. Like, it's right in my wall in front of me. But the idea of, you know, how we are impacts, like who we are impacts how we are, and it's as important as what we do. And I feel like we're preaching to the choir. Kids know, right? Our staff knows. It does not the words, it's how we are. And if we don't have community to be held and have reflective spaces for us to really talk about the impact of the work, it's disservice to babies and families, it's a disservice to all of us as human beings. And so I'm just, I feel like up, you know, onward together is where I'm holding, because this is not oh my God, lots of feelings. I cannot form full sentences, apart from saying like deep gratitude of really, really centering, you know, social emotional well-being, early relational health and mental health for our youngest and families, and for us as the workforce, right? So that we can continue to center babies and families in how we show up in right relationship.
Thank you, Aditi. One of my favorite memories is recent, when Aditi put up quotes, and one of them got me, and I immediately turned off my camera because I was crying. And Aditi texted me and said, "Are you okay?" I was like, questionable, but I'll be back on camera in a minute. And I think just appreciating that time, your expertise, putting your needs maybe aside on those early days of the call to be there for us, and just how I want to thank you for that again. Thank you to that first set of conversations. This may surprise no one. We're running a little behind, but we're going to get back there. And now I want to talk a little bit about our elected officials. So I know we invited Senator Robin Kennedy and Representative Christopher Worrell, who both ran for office during COVID. And so we used to do a first-year legislative tour where I would go to the State House, visit all the new elected legislators in the bullpen before they got their offices. I would be by myself. I would tell them a little about the issue and our organization. We then, 2020, transitioned to doing that first-year tour on the 9:30 call. We invited 3 to 4 legislators who would join us. There was always somebody from their district on the call, and it gave them a chance to tell us a little bit about them, and then kind of why they decided to run for office, and what they, you know, any ideas about early ed and care. So Senator Kennedy, I'd love to start with you, and just, you had a little bit of information about the work coming into the field, but would love to hear from you about your experience.
I appreciate that so much. And quite honestly, I'm getting a little emotional listening to everyone speak. you know, and it's somewhat ironic, Amy, as you're mentioning in your intro about jobs happening, you know, changes in jobs because of the 9:30 call, and in a weird roundabout way, I'm in this position because of the 9:30 call. And I spoke about this before when I did have the chance to join earlier. But as for folks that are new since then, during the time of COVID, I was serving as the Chief Operating Officer at the YWCA in Central Mass, which of course is not only an early education and care provider, but was an emergency provider during the pandemic. And so all the experiences that have been talked about today, I'm having flashbacks living through them. I remember sitting around one desk with my CEO, my CFO, Eve Gilmore from Edward Street, and a couple other of our community providers, and trying to figure out, you know, we were going to be the emergency provider for UMass, and who was going to take who, and what was the rate we were going to all agree upon, just so that we could get things set quickly, and talking to our educators and saying, we're closing tomorrow as our regular families, and on Monday we're going to open up with this emergency process. And you know, just the gratitude I continue to carry in my heart for those educators who said yes, just kept saying yes. How can we help? How can we serve? How can we care for children? How can we care for our community? You know, Manel, to your point, I remember being the vaccine clinics and trying to figure out how to get those vials set up, how to you know, have the difficult conversations around making sure that we were getting our educators who were in the classrooms every day into get them vaccinated, to have that fight with the state, with the city, to make sure that they were being prioritized. And so certainly when this seat opened up, you know, for me, it was really making sure that we could continue not to say thank you, which we, you know, said so many times during the pandemic, but actually show our gratitude for our educators. And that's really been one of my top priorities, both while I was running for office, and certainly the first conversation I had with the Senate president, and continue to have, and, you know, very excited that the Senate passed the Early Ed Act, and certainly was really proud to stand there with my colleagues. And, you know, we are so fortunate both in the Senate and the House that we have so many champions for early education and care, but I'm also reminded daily of the value of having the provider lens at the table. I know you all know as well as I do of so many times where we say that may seem like a great policy, but it really doesn't translate on the ground. And what we think is happening when you're looking at statewide legislation or funding or policy, that how that looks on the ground with humans doing the work is not always in line. And so really having that lens has been incredibly important for me, and being able to continue to carry the work of our educators, of our providers, and to be able to continue to know where we need to grow. I think that to Lucas's point about making sure that family providers are more consistently brought to the table and leading in the conversation, that, you know, we're looking innovatively, whether it's partnerships with the Worcester Public Schools, but public schools in general system, to help expand access in partnership with our providers, to expand access to pre-K, to make sure we're looking at, you know, the FFN network as well, and looking at where there's, you know, care during off hours that our providers are not able to offer, but we know is necessary care in our community. And so it's so much of the voices of my partners in my district, in my community in Worcester and in the surrounding towns, but certainly I know across the state that's incredibly valuable. So I appreciate all of you so deeply, and it's such a wonderful moment to be back here and to be able to reminisce a little bit, but also to hear about all the wonderful joy and support that this call has brought in. And because I can agree, there was really dark days with very little hope, and for me, it was our providers that really brought that. So thank you so much.
Senator, I love the 9:30 call. I went to your office. I mean, that's I think the other thing, and Rep. Royal, I see that you're here, is really like humanizing legislators. We've heard so many times, oh my gosh, they're just like me. Oh my gosh, they, you know, hearing everyone's story why they ran for office really made an impact, and had people feel confident, like I can talk to an elected official, like they're just like me. So Rep. Worrell, for you, you ran in Boston. You are on the education committee. We know the senator is the chair of Children and Families. So tell us about your experience about running and kind of where things are today.
Oh man, my experience on running was is a roller coaster for whoever decided to to throw their hat in the ring. But after that roller coaster, it's truly smooth sailing, the best job that I have ever had in my entire life, representing the people where I grew up and now raising a family, and also being a part of the education committee for the state. It's incredible because I have two young ones, and hearing what's coming down the pipeline for them, I get excited about it, and seeing what is what we're trying to fight against, and just making sure that they're well-rounded, making sure our children throughout Massachusetts is well-rounding, and having that quality A1 education that every child deserves in Massachusetts.
And so when you think about how have you connected with providers in your district?
Oh man, I am the rep that likes to read to kids. I am the rep that likes to show up. I am the rep that does every and anything for community, for children. Like right now, looking at my email, I got at least like 2 or 3 schools that want me to read to their early education students. So I'm just always being a provider, and always trying to link up with provider with resources in any way, which way I can help, and making sure my community sees who I am, and making sure that that they have representation on Beacon Hill that looks like them and from their neighborhood. And one exciting thing that I did was a tour of early education centers with Denise Garlick, the chair of the education committee. We went to early education centers in the district, showing the education committee what it looks like and what challenges the Fifth Suffolk deals with in those spaces.
That's right. And so when Chair Garlick took over the education committee, this is one of her priorities, and the education committee members helped her, and to brought members out to the programs to see, to feel, to touch, to hear what was happening. Well, Senator and Rep, we so appreciate you joining us today. We are so fortunate in Massachusetts to have elected officials that will answer the call, that will come and have conversation, that will come to us, that we don't have to go to them at the State House. So we just so appreciate and the work that you're doing every day, but especially to both of you for your leadership on these issues, and really listening to what people want and need, and then thinking about what the policy can be for that. So let's show some 930 call love in the chat for Senator Kennedy and Rep. Laurel.
And I also want to thank everyone on the 930 call. It's a lot to get online at 930 to hear an elected official that might represent you or might not represent you. But the advocacy that you guys do, and the questions when I came on that was given to me, it shows me a different perspective on what needs to happen in the state of Massachusetts. I know I represent Dorchester and Roxbury, but if you look at the 3 pages, the 70-something people that's in this room, it represents the whole Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I thank you for all your advocacy you guys do, from the Cape and the Islands to the North Adams to Dorchester and Roxbury. Thank you guys so much.
That's so true, Rep. That has been such a critical part of this, and it has been statewide. We actually have also other states joining in and listening, but that really has been the spirit of this call. So speaking of the spirit of the call, Brian Dixon, longtime caller here. Brian, the Stone Foundation has been an incredible partner for our work, but you showed up every day at 9:30 from the beginning. And so I'd love to hear about your experience as a caller and a funder. And then, I think we're grateful for the Stone relationship. Stone has done so much work internally, and I know Sarah will talk a little bit about this. But tell us what your experience has been like.
Yeah. So I came as a funder. Like, I joined this call because I was a funder. Amy and I were having some conversation, and she mentioned the call. And so I jumped on one morning. I don't even remember when, but very early on. And it has become this resource for me. We talk in philanthropy about having voices of those served by our work, informing our work, but there's not a lot of vehicles for us to get that information regularly. And the 930 call really is a place where I am able to get firsthand experience and knowledge every single day. And so every conversation that I have now is informed by all of these voices, reminding me to think about family childcare, reminding me to think about educators. And we focus on the workforce, but having the voices of the workforce in my head every single day as I'm going about this work is so valuable and has really made me a much better funder. And so I just expressed that gratitude. And then, but as a caller, I just want to echo what's been said. This, for me, also became a lifeline. I was just remembering, we buried my grandmother, my beloved grandmother. It's something like 3 days before everything shut down, right? And so I'm bringing into the pandemic my own grief, and then being able to find this place, this lifeline, that all of us were sort of holding the collective grief and the disconnection we were feeling, that disconnection we were feeling. And I'm sitting alone in my apartment, knowing that at least every morning I'm going to have this connection. And that voice, I mean, DT and Christy have been named so often, but having that reminder to notice one thing that I can see and two things that I can hear really was such a lifeline. And I'm so grateful for the ways that I've been able to be supported and be a part of this community.
Thank you. Brian is also a prolific messenger during the 930 call and will often say, like, that is the most Boston or Massachusetts 930 call thing I have heard. So I did get him some Massachusetts phrases magnets so that he feels Brian isn't physically in Philadelphia, but and I think it has helped us. I think some in the beginning to have a funder on the call may have worried people to think about, oh gosh, we're kind of being very vulnerable. And I think to see what the benefits of that have just been remarkable. And so Sarah, when you think about, you're based in Chicago and you haven't necessarily been as active as Brian on the call. You've joined occasionally you presented on the call. With all the work that Stone is funding, what was it that stood out to you about the call that suggested that it was worthy funding a case study?
Well, yeah, so thank you. As we look back, I realize those pandemic emotions are really still raw, right? And it's so it's helpful to look back and process. But so as I did sort of parachute in, but what became clear to me quickly was that what was happening in this space was clearly very important for Massachusetts early childhood. And there were some universal values here as well. And so I guess what, you guys know that the Massachusetts story better than I, but so I want to lift up some of those things that I saw sort of as being universal. And, with the first one being information is power, right? And at the beginning of the pandemic, no one had all information or enough information. Right. And it was humbling, right? It was humbling and scary to not have all the information that you needed. And I think, recognizing that society, we place different values on different kinds of information, and sadly, not enough value on the information that's brought to us by providers, teachers, family providers, etc. Right? But the 930 call showed us that when we place value on all those types of information and knowledge, we are better off. Right? So it was unifying and it was powerful when we valued all sorts of information and knowledge. And the second thing that I think is sort of universal is that there's a saying that progress moves at the speed of trust, right? And lots of folks say that, but very few practice that. And I think what you guys have done is you've sort of put in practice, you've operationalized this idea of progress moves at the speed of trust. And, you know, Amy and team strategies, you guys were trusted, but you didn't just expand your own network of trust. You created this web, this interlocking, you know, in all of these boxes, it's going across and through and up and down of trust amongst people from different places and roles and such. And that's so important. And I think a large part of, you know, the progress that's happening now and that will happen in the future. So again, thank you for doing that. And then the last thing I would just say is that idea of being seen and appreciated. And I think you've said before, you know, some of the others have said, you know, being human and vulnerable. And the thing that struck me the most was on your anniversary call, and Governor Healy said she walked into a childcare center and the kids all came up and grabbed her leg and gave her a hug. And they said they have no idea, you know, what power I have and who I am and my reach, right? It doesn't matter. People want to be seen, right? And, you know, and so I think my call to action, if you will, is that those things are important, yes, in Massachusetts early childhood, but in every aspect of our lives, right? We know now, like, our teens want to be seen and understood, even if they don't ask for that attention in the best of ways. You know, migrants, so many others, that those things, like, all information is valuable. You know, we all want to be seen, and progress moves at the speed of trust, especially sustainable progress. So while this is a rare space, my hope is that it becomes less rare and more common, that those values, approaches, and feelings can have tentacles into those other spaces as well. But I so appreciate this, and it's been just wonderful to be a small part of it.
Thank you, Sarah. You're a big part. You're a big part of the Strategies for Children story. Your innovation as a funder, and you're following the same principles about being seen, about trust, and about the power dynamic, right? And really thinking about that as a funder. And through the work at Stone and your kind of your report on equity as a verb is how we got connected to Minna. I got interviewed for that piece, and so Minna would love to talk to you. You know, your bigger work around narrative, around thinking about why we need to, you know, tell our stories and document it. So just would love to hear a minute from you, a minute or two about your experience and kind of how this fits into your bigger mission in life.
Sure. Great. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. I will just say that, I mean, as my bio says in the case study, I have worked in the social sector for 30 years, and it is such across many different issue areas. And it is the most common thing that's raised in the work that I do, that where people and systems are not able to work in alignment towards shared goals to make progress. And so that's why I focus so much on narrative work and communications, because messaging and shared narratives can help bring people together. So what was striking to me when I started working on this case study was everyone I talked to about this call, about this community, was they felt exactly the opposite, that it was not just a call, but it was a place where people could align and silos could be broken down and people could actually work towards shared goals. And so it was remarkable to find so many people echoing from so many different types of roles, echoing the same principles about how do we form stronger partnerships and alliances to make progress. And then what was also clear was, you know, it was clear that the evolution of the 930 call was happening in a very organic and inclusive and purposeful way. So really my job in the case study was just to capture how the heck did this happen? What were the ingredients that went into it? And I don't believe that it's necessarily easy to replicate the special ingredients that are a part of the 930 call and replicate the success of Strategies for Children and what this community has done. But I do think the case study is really important to show that it can be done, that this type of alignment and this type of progress and partnership is possible. And so I hope that people outside of Massachusetts who work in early education and in other fields too can really see that this can be done, and that you all have proved that it can be done with this 930 call. So I was very honored to write this case study. It was a terrific experience. Not all case studies for me are terrific experiences, but for this one, the storyline was inspiring and it was joyful. And I thank you so much for inviting me to help you get it down on paper.
Thank you, Minna. And I think we knew that the case study was going to be an important tool, I think, to what Sarah talked about, to kind of, we've had questions and wonderings about how we started it, the evolution. We also are creating this companion blueprint that can answer some of the more nuts and bolts. So as people are reading the case study, and we know everyone's busy, and even as people are reading it, understanding it, we really want to kind of keep this blueprint a living document of like, oh, we didn't think about this, or this is how you figure out how to invite guests, which is really like, I meet somebody, we hear somebody, would you like to come on the 930 call? So, Minna, I think anytime you kind of hand over something so personal, a bit like the 930 call, and just the care that you took, just the thoughtfulness of how the time that you spent with each one of our staff, especially me, I can't thank you enough. Because I think it's also hard to have a case study that doesn't quite meet the mark of what you were hoping to do. And I think what you put together really did. We're running we're almost caught up, but I want to kind of turn to Jade, Harold, and Paula. And so Jade, Harold, and Paula, who are part of our Advocacy Cohort 3, Advocacy Network Cohort 3, would love to hear some quick reflections from you. Jade, you have been a newcomer to the call. You have been a social media sharer of what you've heard in the call. And then Harold and Paula would love to hear more about the 930 call at night in Spanish. And then please stick around as long, because we have Kim, Lucas, and Brian Gold. They're going to bring us home. So Jade, let's start with you. Let's tell us a little bit about how you came to the call.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade. Well, I got on the call from being a part of the Strategies Cohort 3. I found out about it, and at first I was just like, oh, I wish I would have known about this during COVID, just because I know it would have helped a ton, just because 6 months prior to the shutdown, I had just became a director. So there was just a ton of fear. I had nowhere to go, didn't have a lot of like director friends at the time. So, but to be a part of it now and to get all the connections that I've had, it's pretty wonderful to be a part of this, for sure. I could really say that to be a part of this community just shows the magnitude and the importance that early childhood education has, not only in Massachusetts, but across the US. Just because from the call, since I've started joining since last year, I've met and seen so many different people that in this field are going through the same exact issues that we all are going through. Rather it's in family child care, advocacy work, privately owned, nonprofit, when it has to do with children and families, we're all able to relate. It's sad too, in a sense, that we're still going through a lot of these things, just because I did for a point in time during COVID, when they did call us first responders, educators. For a smidget, I really believe that things were going to change for us once things got better. And to see that things kind of went almost backwards to how educators were treated before COVID, it kind of still made me sad, and I hope that a call like this, and how it has grown, can help support all educators everywhere.
Thanks, Jade. And it's been great to see you be part of the network, and then all of your fellow advocates who are coming up with projects to do just what you talked about. Like, how do we keep this momentum and this attention going?
Yeah.
And so Harold and Paula, who are our first husband and wife team that we accepted into our advocacy network, Cohort 3 in Springfield, Mass. So tell us a little bit about how you got here and the 9:30 call in Spanish.
Well, I want to say I want to be a child again because I want to be lucky enough to have this group of people fighting for my rights and for my future. Thank you all, and thank you for let us be part of this journey. And we are, in the beginning, I didn't answer the call. We were emergency care during the pandemic, and that was an overwhelming moment. So be at 9:30, focusing in the call. I need to be focused in taking care of the kids and not make mistakes with all the regulations and all the craziness. So, but we were lucky enough to have somebody advocate for reunite and have this space. So I remember Miss Tess from the Family Child Care Provider sent me an invitation for be on July 23rd at 7 o'clock, a meeting with Amy O'Leary, and I participate, and I say, wow, it's incredible all the information I can get. And that was the perfect time for me because in the morning I couldn't focus on nothing else, just taking care of the children.
That's true. For me, the first time that I heard about the 9:30 call after Paula mentioned that, but we belong to this affinity group in the Western Massachusetts, and we heard it from Leea from the first time. Leea being part of the first cohort, and when we got invited to be part of the third cohort, I remember talking to Leea Cooley about it, and she said, "You can trust Titus and Jaylee's. You can trust those guys. They're doing an amazing job." And so thank you to Leea for pushing us to take this lead. And we feel really honored to be being part of this future of the 9:30 call now, because listening to all of you, you started from the beginning. We just started like recently in the last few months, and we have learned so much. We have the most important thing is that now we know that we're not alone in this. We're all fighting together. We have found so many people that align with the same situations and asks that we do all the time. So we really feel very blessed. And when you ask us to host the 9:30 call in Spanish at night, it was great because it aligns with what we are doing to provide more information to our community, to our fellow providers, especially in our language of Spanish, that we know that sometimes the message doesn't get right on time to them. And so it's great to have the being host of the 9:30 call in Spanish.
Now, Harold, I wouldn't say we quite asked you. I think it was a little bit of a negotiation that you had the idea, and we said, let's join forces to do this because this was part of your advocacy network project.
Yeah, I mentioned that's right. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
We mentioned that we wanted to start some kind of a podcast or something so we can discuss this in Spanish. All the things that at 9:30 call in the morning are talking so much important stuff. Let's talk about it in our own language.
And also the community we create, Eco Latino.
Yes.
That's right. So so I think I think you were such an active participant in helping us think through taking on the responsibility along with Neri about even thinking about this different format. So the 9:30 call at night in Spanish is all in Spanish, as Neri said, and you are inviting guest speakers to come for the beginning, which you're recording, but then you're also allowing time for conversation that's not recorded.
To be the open forum that we all need to be able to express ourselves.
But so if you think about the 9:30 call in the morning, the 9:30 call at night, and these are both at 6:30 at night, but it was too good for the branding to not have that. And the 9:30 call in Spanish all have a little bit of a different format, all kind of responding to kind of the community that's showing up there. But I think it's also kind of back to Minna's and Sarah's point about this is how you think about what other states could do or how you replicate something that's not exactly the same, but that is responsive to the community that you're trying to connect with. And I think you've only had 2 9:30 calls in Spanish. The next one is coming up, and you have Jeanette Montoya coming from the Department of Early Education and Care, who was a family child care provider who now is working for the state. So I think the other kind of headline here is like this like this mobility around different parts of the system where people are, you know, we often talked about infiltration at Strategies for Children, which makes our friends in state government a little nervous. But we do believe that this support, this trust, this knowledge and information getting and sharing is part of this process. You know, to hear so far everybody who's talked about showing up, understanding what you knew in your kind of circle, whether you were sitting alone in your apartment or you were sitting in the middle of a family childcare. We had one photo of kids watching the 9:30 call in a family childcare provider, because that's, you know, they made it part of they put the computer on and it's part of the day. And so this is in March 2020. So I think just really want to appreciate and reflect. And now I'm going to bring two superstars on, Kim Lucas and Brian Gold, who have been partners from the beginning as well, not just in the 9:30 call, but in the work that Strategies has done. And so just would love to turn to you for some closing reflections, comments. You had the chance to think about this before, but now as you've heard everybody sharing, I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks, Amy. And wow, this has been amazing. So thank you for having us, and to everyone for the vibrant conversation this afternoon in chat and live. In the spirit of the 9:30 call, we came together and decided to intertwine our closing remarks. As you mentioned, Kim and I knew each other before the 9:30 call, but through the call, we've really built and strengthened relationships with so many individuals across the state, with both longtime and newer attendees, and continuing to do that now, right, with new attendees on today. So now we'll take just a few minutes to reflect on what we heard today, share our own experiences, and call on all of you to envision what's next for our 9:30 call community. So typically on the 9:30 call, we start with sharing about ourselves and then broadening, but in this case, we're going to flip that script.
Yeah, so, you know, the folks we heard from today reflect the full breadth of the 9:30 call community, what in the Elevating Voices continuum are known as ones, twos, and threes, and some of us have renamed ourselves in that style on the call today. And so that means, you know, from those who work directly with children and families every day, so those are the ones, and to those like Brian and myself who don't work directly with children and families, but have a vested interest, and that's why we're threes. Across all of our speakers, we've heard a few big takeaways that I want to just uplift in addition to what's in the case study. So today, I think we heard of the 9:30 call as a place of action and a place of power. Our collective openness, vulnerability, our consistent welcoming, and our consistent trust building has really led to creating community, to creating advocacy, and creating change. The 9:30 call is a place of deep and broad connection, both. It's a way to bring everyone to the policy table and to bring policymakers and funders in conversation with those who are in direct service, working directly with our young children, their families, and all of the folks who surround them. And finally, I think the 9:30 call is a lifeline, right? We hear this so often and in the chat so much. It's a place to be supported and to provide support.
And we're always constantly learning from everyone on the 9:30 call, especially as our community continues to grow. This is a community that has and is expanding the idea of what early education and care is and what it can be. It's an inclusive community, one that shares power, and a community that allows everyone to find themselves in the space. I think we've heard all of that so far this afternoon. And together with Strategies for Children as our stewards, and with each of us committing to show up for one another day in and day out, our community continues to grow, collaborate, and share challenges, opportunities, and strengths. We continue to center young children and their families, which, you know, I think we think all from being here, no doubt, is important every day, but especially now with the Week of the Young Child starting on Saturday. And as we've heard so much about mental health and supports, next month, May being Mental Health Awareness Month. And so while we're also centering young children and their families, we've also in so many ways centered and supported each other, especially those who are closest to children, the ones, the parents, the providers, and practitioners. So let's talk about our own experiences with the 9:30 call.
All right, so I'll kick off. As a researcher, I usually come to the 9:30 call to share something that I know or to learn from others. And Since I'm in academia, I'm in teaching and learning spaces all the time. But what makes this teaching and learning space unique, at least to me, is that the learning that occurs in this space is almost always immediately applied. As I've learned about COVID in real time with Dr. Shu, or about early childhood mental health with Aditi and Christy, or about what early educators and directors are experiencing during updates from the field, what I'm most impressed by is that we're not just learning together and we're not just asking questions and joining the conversation, but that we're learning in order to take action and make change. We're not learning for learning's sake, but instead we're all learning together so that we can make this field better for young children, for their families, and for one another. How about you, Brian? What are your takeaways?
So the Early Childhood Funder Collaborative has as our vision that all young children have the opportunities and supports they need to thrive. And those opportunities and those supports, these are led by everyone here. So professionally, I came to the call in March 2020 as a funder to learn how I could help in a time of crisis. My work, as I think we've heard earlier, is most impactful, done best when philanthropy is authentically connected to and led by community. So during those critical daily half-hour calls in a time of chaos, all the ones here help to provide that light. Your actions and innovations really were what provided the leadership and clarity on what I and other funders on the call could do to support and uplift and share that throughout the landscape. And that's still the same today. Quoting Kim Davenport, we've moved from crisis response to an innovation lab to a space for advocacy. We've seen and will continue to see seismic changes in the early childhood space, all from everyone here. And my hope is to be able to continue to support and uplift all of that work, that all the inspiring work that you all are doing. And personally, this call has also been instrumental to me. As a parent of now 2 little ones, both of whom have made appearances on the 9:30 call. And by the way, I love seeing children on the call. That's perhaps they and the updates from the field are my favorite guests. And as a foster parent during the earlier COVID days, deeply and actively listening to everyone on the call, especially the ones, has really helped me to learn and grow my personal life every day. And I'm indebted to everyone in this community for that. So all of this is what brought me to the 9:30 call initially. And all of this is what continues to keep me coming back.
Woo. All right, everybody, what now? Where do we go from here? I think one thing that was clear to the both of us as we read through the case study is that the strength of the 9:30 call comes from the strength and passion and care of the 9:30 callers. That's you. So we want to close with a few questions for all of you to consider. What's an academic without some questions? So 3 things that we want you to think about. How can we keep connecting? How can we show up for one another, both online and in person when we can? What practices do we need to put in place so that we're taking care of ourselves and one another so that we can keep showing up? And what does it look like to invite and welcome new people into the 9:30 call? I feel like there's a good chunk of folks who are new here who have represented themselves in the chat. Welcome. And what does it look like to continuously keep this space one that is truly for everyone who wants to be here? As you think about these questions, okay, here we go. Here's our challenge. We want you to think about someone you've met or you've learned about through the 9:30 call. Or you can even think about someone you know who might really like to be a 9:30 caller. And in the next week, we're looking to you to reach out to that person to build or strengthen your connection. You could introduce yourself, just ask a question, maybe give a compliment on what they presented or something they said in the chat. You could share the sign-up link or tune in with them at 9:30 together. And whoever you think of, however you reach out, we're looking to you to take the 9:30 call beyond just that 30-minute block of time each morning and into the rest of your day. Okay, so let's go 9:30 callers, let's go do it. And congratulations to all of you on 4 years and more of building a strong, vibrant, passionate, and caring community. Thanks, everyone. Back to you, Amy.
Kim and Brian, I mean, could we have scripted a better 9:30 call ending? How 9:30 call was that? I love the questions, Kim. We'll continue to ask them. It's amazing how well everything lined up with what you had already prepared and then what you heard. Just one quick story that Marissa and I had a conversation with the director who was not new to the space, but new to her program. And we somehow got connected and we asked her about the 9:30 call. And she said, oh, I heard about that call, but I thought that call, I saw legislators run that call. So I didn't think that call was for me. And we've heard that sentiment over, like, what spaces do we belong in? I think what we have seen, to have 440 people show up to hear Governor Healy on the 9:30 call, to feel connected to legislators. Greg Barrett from Gears in Georgia came to an event in Boston at Harvard. And he said that he walked around this event and people were like, weren't you on the 9:30 call? In Georgia, he was on the call once, but he talked about the bus tour in Georgia. So Kim and Brian, I love the questions. I love the reflections. I also just want to make sure that we keep this going and acknowledge again kind of the team at Strategies for Children. This is a full team effort. I get to be the host. Jay Leese is here too, who is our project manager for the program assistant for the Advocacy Network. I think you've heard about how much we believe in trust and connection, and really appreciate Kim's last question around find somebody and make sure they know that they belong here at the 9:30 call. Thank you for sticking around. We know we went over. We had a big debate about how much time we knew we were going to go over, but we are recording this. So if you're tuning in and watching the recording, we're so glad that you spent this time with us. So much good information, so many powerful reflections here today. So please continue to join us at either at the 9:30 call in the morning, the 9:30 call at night, the 9:30 call in Spanish, and who knows what 9:30 call will evolve from our conversations today. Thanks to everybody who shared their stories, who took time to join us today, and we will see you on the 9:30 call. Have a great day.